plot against the millionaire. In the heart of a gated community, nestled behind tall iron gates and flourishing gardens, stood the majestic estate of Thomas Harrington. His mansion, a symbol of unrelenting ambition and unmatched success, glimmered under the golden rays of the setting sun. From the outside, everything about his life appeared perfect, an empire built through decades of perseverance, sacrifice, and relentless drive. He was the definition of a self-made millionaire, the man who seemed to have it all. The mansion, the cars, the vacations. His wealth stretched far and wide, admired by colleagues, competitors, and friends alike. Yet behind the luxury, in the quiet moments of reflection, Thomas had no idea how fragile his perfect life truly was. Beside him, as she had always been, was Clara, his wife. On the surface, she was the ideal partner, graceful, elegant, and supportive, the embodiment of the perfect wife, always at Thomas's side, offering gentle encouragement as he worked tirelessly to build their future. Her beauty was undeniable, and in every gathering, every social event, she exuded a sense of poise that seemed effortlessly perfect. But beneath this facade, something began to change in Clara. A quiet restlessness had taken root within her heart, growing with each passing day. It was a hunger, a yearning that money and luxury could not fulfill. The glamorous life she had with Thomas felt increasingly hollow, like a stage set of perfection, but lacking in genuine satisfaction. Clara longed for something more, something beyond the life Thomas had created for them. She had always admired his drive, his tenacity, his endless ambition, but it was now clear that all of this was his, not theirs. His empire had become a gilded cage, and Clara began to resent that her dreams were secondary to his. She loved him, but a part of her felt suffocated, trapped by the very life that Thomas had worked so hard to create. The mansion, with all its grandeur, became a symbol, not of success, but of her limitations. It wasn't just Clara's discontent that would soon unravel their world. Jack, Thomas's younger brother, had always shared a complicated relationship with him. Thomas saw Jack as family, someone to trust, someone who could share in his vision and the fruits of his labor. But Jack had never shared the same respect for Thomas. To Jack, Thomas was not a model of success, but a man who had hoarded everything for himself. Jack felt entitled to the life that Thomas had built, believing that he too deserved a share of the wealth, the power, and the freedom. The jealousy he harbored festered quietly, like a shadow in the corners of his mind, waiting for the right moment to emerge. That moment came one fateful evening. As Clara and Jack sat together in the dimly lit living room, sipping their wine, a conversation began that would alter the course of their lives. Clara, her voice barely a whisper, laid bare the deepest secret of her heart. She confessed to Jack the plan she had been silently nursing for months. The plan to eliminate Thomas, to take everything from him and inherit it all. She didn't just want his fortune, she wanted freedom. Freedom from the life Thomas had built for them. She no longer wanted to be a passenger in his world, she wanted to seize control. And Jack, with his bitterness and his own desires, saw the opportunity he had been waiting for. Together, they devised a plot so carefully calculated, so deceptively simple, that it seemed impossible to fail. Jack had access to the mansion's garage, trusted by Thomas to maintain the vehicles and ensure their safety. The plan was deceptively simple. Tamper with the brakes of Thomas's car, making it look like a tragic accident, a misfortune that no one could have predicted. There would be no suspicion, no evidence of foul play. The perfect crime. Thomas's death would clear the path to the wealth and power Clara and Jack so desperately craved. They would inherit everything, and the life they had dreamed of would finally be theirs. But what Clara and Jack failed to realize was that their perfect plan would not remain undetected. The plot they had woven in the shadows was about to be exposed in a way neither of them could have imagined. A pair of innocent eyes were watching, hearing, and preparing to stop them before they could bring their twisted plan to fruition. A street boy, with no home to call his own, would become the unlikely hero who would change everything. The homeless boy's discovery. William had always known what it felt like to be invisible. A child of the streets, he spent his days drifting through alleyways, hidden in plain sight, unnoticed by the world that passed him by. The cold was his constant companion, the hunger his constant reminder that the world had no place for someone like him. He didn't ask for much. Just a roof over his head, a warm meal, and perhaps, if the day was kind, a moment of peace. But in the world he lived in, those things were luxuries, far out of reach for someone who had nothing to his name but the clothes on his back and the fear that shadowed every step. Yet it was in the midst of this endless struggle, this life lived on the edge, that William learned to see things others overlooked. While people in the city moved with purpose, heads held high, lost in their own worlds of worry and ambition, William learned to observe. He learned to listen. He had to, for survival. His eyes were sharp, and his ears even sharper. It wasn't just the sounds of the city that he tuned into. It was the whispers, the secrets exchanged in quiet corners and hushed voices. People thought he was just a homeless boy, someone not worth noticing, but William understood more than they could imagine. That night, as the icy wind blew through the empty parking lot behind the city's grandest mansions, William found himself seeking shelter from the cold. He had slipped into the shadows, hidden behind parked cars, hoping to escape the biting chill of the air. But as he huddled in the dark, he noticed something that caught his attention. Two figures stood near the edge of the lot, their heads bent low, speaking in urgent tones. At first, their words were nothing more than a faint murmur, drowned out by the distant hum of traffic. But then, as if sensing his presence, their voices grew sharper. William strained his ears, pulling his tattered coat tighter around himself, trying to blend into the darkness as he listened. It didn't take long for him to understand that what he was hearing was not just an ordinary conversation. It was a plot, a plan to destroy someone's life, to take it away for nothing more than greed and desire for wealth. The voices belonged to Clara and Jack, a woman and her brother, speaking in low, secretive tones about the death of Thomas Harrington, the millionaire who lived in the mansion nearby. William's heart raced as he pieced together their words. They were planning to kill Thomas, make it look like an accident. Clara, Thomas's wife, was in on it, willing to betray him for the sake of money. Jack, her brother, had access to Thomas's car and would tamper with the brakes, ensuring that Thomas's death would appear to be nothing more than a tragic, unavoidable event. The conspiracy was chilling, and the realization that William had stumbled upon it weighed heavily on him. Though he was just a boy, his sense of right and wrong burned within him. He had no family to speak of, no home to return to, but he had something that these two conspirators had clearly forgotten: a conscience. He could feel the injustice of it, the wrongness of it all. His body trembled, not from the cold, but from the gravity of what he had just overheard. What if he did nothing? What if he let Thomas fall victim to this treacherous plan? It wasn't his business, not really. He had no place in the world of millionaires or their schemes. But as William listened to Clara and Jack speak with such cold detachment about the life they planned to steal, something within him refused to let it go. This wasn't just about money. It was about human life, about right and wrong, and William knew that despite his circumstances, despite the fact that no one would believe him, he couldn't just walk away. So, as the cold night pressed in around him, William made a decision. He would warn Thomas. He didn't know how, he didn't know if he could even get close enough to speak to him, but he knew he had to try. The world might not care about a homeless boy, but maybe, just maybe, his voice could stop a tragedy from unfolding. With the weight of the secret heavy on his shoulders, William crept away from the parking lot, his heart pounding in his chest. The mansion loomed ahead, its grand gates glimmering under the moonlight, and for the first time in his life, William felt the sharp sting of both fear and determination. What he had learned tonight could change everything, but only if he found the courage to act. The boy warns the millionaire. The city was still asleep when William made his way to the grand gates of the Harrington estate the next morning. He hadn't slept a wink the entire night. His mind replayed every word Clara and Jack had exchanged, the gravity of their betrayal hanging over him like a dark cloud. He had witnessed countless injustices in his young life, but this felt different. This wasn't just about survival or theft. It was a plot that would take a man's life, a man who had no idea that those closest to him were plotting his destruction. It wasn't just the cold wind biting at his skin, or the gnawing hunger in his stomach that consumed him. It was the weight of the truth he now carried, one that he knew he had to share, even if no one would believe him. He didn't know Thomas Harrington. He had never met him, nor did he have any reason to believe the millionaire would give a homeless boy a second glance. But something in William's gut told him that if he didn't act, if he didn't try to stop this conspiracy, Thomas would become another casualty of greed and deceit. The plan Clara and Jack had devised was a simple one, but it would be deadly, tampering with the brakes, making it look like an accident. No one would question it, not even for a moment. It was foolproof. But William wasn't just a boy on the streets. He was someone who had learned to listen, to pay attention, to see the hidden truths that others missed. And he had seen enough to know that what was happening wasn't just wrong, it was evil. The problem was, how could he convince someone like Thomas Harrington to believe him? A street boy with nothing but a few words of warning and a desperate plea for help. Who would listen? The millionaire's car appeared on the horizon, and William's heart skipped a beat. This was it. He had been waiting for this moment, but now that it was here, the weight of what he had to do felt almost unbearable. He stepped into the path of the car, his feet trembling as the vehicle drew closer. He knew he had only seconds before it would speed past him, disappearing into the distance. Thomas's car slowed down as it neared him, the tinted windows rolling down. William's breath caught in his throat, his voice caught somewhere between fear and urgency. "Sir, please, I need to talk to you. It's urgent. It's about your safety." Thomas looked at him with a mix of confusion and irritation, clearly not expecting a boy to step out of nowhere and block his path. "What is it, kid?" His voice was sharp, a little annoyed, but there was a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. "I overheard something," William said, his words tumbling out in a rush. "It's about your wife, Clara, and your brother, Jack. They're planning something terrible. They want to hurt you. They want to make it look like an accident. They've tampered with your car, with the brakes. Please, sir, you have to believe me. They're going to kill you." The silence that followed was deafening. Thomas stared at the boy, his eyes narrowing in disbelief. He let out a short laugh, clearly dismissing the warning. "That's absurd. Clara and Jack would never do something like that. I've known them both for years. They're family." William's heart sank, but he refused to back down. "Please, you don't understand. I heard them. They were talking about it. They're going to make it look like an accident. You have to check your brakes before you drive today. I'm telling you the truth." Thomas remained silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on William. There was something in the boy's eyes, something desperate and raw, that made him hesitate. His instincts, the same instincts that had made him a successful businessman, warned him that there was something more to this than he wanted to admit. "Just check the car," William urged, his voice rising with the urgency that was beginning to pulse through him. "Please." For a long moment, Thomas didn't respond. He stared at William, his face unreadable. The rational part of his mind screamed that this was absurd, that a street boy had no reason to know what was going on in his life. But there was something in the boy's eyes, a sincerity that Thomas couldn't ignore. Slowly, almost reluctantly, Thomas sighed and nodded. "Fine, I'll check it. But if this is some kind of joke—" "It's not a joke," William interrupted, his voice trembling but firm. "Please, just check." Thomas nodded curtly, still skeptical but no longer able to dismiss the boy entirely. As he pulled his car into the driveway and stepped out, William stood back, watching closely. He didn't know if this would work, but he had to trust that he had done what was right. The boy didn't know what he expected, but he knew that time was running out. Minutes passed in tense silence as Thomas stood by the garage, his personal mechanic inspecting the car's brakes. The seconds dragged by, each one heavier than the last. And then the mechanic's voice broke through the tension, cold and chilling. "Mr. Harrington, the brakes. They've been tampered with. Someone's been messing with them." Thomas's blood ran cold. The world around him seemed to shatter, and in that moment he understood the gravity of what had been unfolding behind his back. His hands trembled as he realized the extent of the betrayal. The plan to take his life, to erase him from the world, all for the sake of greed. His trust in those closest to him had been shattered in an instant. Turning to William, Thomas's eyes softened, no longer filled with skepticism, but with something else, something akin to gratitude and awe. "You saved my life, boy," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how, but you did." William, still reeling from the gravity of what he had just witnessed, nodded silently. He had done what he set out to do. He had warned Thomas, and now the millionaire had a chance to survive. What happened next, William didn't know, but in that moment, he knew that he had made a difference. Uncovering the truth and taking action. Thomas stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest. The realization of what had just unfolded before him was like a punch to the gut. He had trusted them, his wife, Clara, and his own brother, Jack. They had been his family, the people closest to him, and yet they were the very ones plotting his demise. The betrayal was overwhelming, and for a long moment, Thomas didn't know how to process the weight of it. How could they do this? How could the people he had loved and protected turn on him so completely? As he stood there, staring at the car, his mind raced through memories of every moment he had shared with Clara and Jack. He thought back to the times he had entrusted Jack with responsibilities, thinking of him as someone who shared his vision, his values. He remembered Clara's smiles, the way she had always stood by his side, offering encouragement, making him feel like their life together was a dream come true. And now all of it was a lie, a cruel, heartless lie, built on a foundation of greed and deceit. The mechanic, his voice trembling, stepped back from the car and wiped his hands on a rag. "Mr. Harrington, it's as the boy said. The brakes were tampered with. Someone wanted you dead." Thomas felt a chill run down his spine, the full extent of the conspiracy settling in like a weight on his shoulders. He looked back at William, standing a few feet away, his eyes filled with quiet determination. There was no doubt in Thomas's mind now. This boy had risked everything to warn him. The boy had no reason to get involved in this, no reason to care about a millionaire like him, yet he had acted on something more than self-preservation. He had cared about a more William had done what few others would have done, especially someone with so little. The boy had shown courage, integrity, and an unshakable sense of right and wrong. Thomas stepped toward him, his expression softening. "You've saved my life today," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. "I don't know how, but you did." William nodded quietly, not seeking praise or recognition. For him, it wasn't about accolades or gratitude. It was about doing what was right. And deep inside, he knew that despite the circumstances, he had done something far more significant than anyone could have imagined. But this was only the beginning. Thomas knew that while his life had been spared, the truth about Clara and Jack's betrayal could not remain hidden. They had to be exposed, the plot needed to be unraveled, and the people who had plotted his death had to face justice. It wasn't enough to know the truth. Clara and Jack would not rest until they were certain they had succeeded in their plan, and that meant Thomas had to act quickly. "I can't do this alone," Thomas said, turning back to William. "You've already done more for me than anyone ever has, and now I need your help again. We need to expose them, but we have to be careful. They can't know we're on to them." William met his gaze, his resolve unwavering. "I'll help you," he said simply. "They won't even know we're on to them." Thomas couldn't help but feel a deep sense of admiration for the boy. He had lived a life that most could never imagine, surviving on the streets, trusting no one, and yet here he was, willing to risk everything to protect someone he barely knew. It wasn't just about survival for William. It was about doing the right thing, no matter the cost. As the two of them began to formulate a plan, Thomas's mind raced. Confronting Clara and Jack wasn't enough. They needed to believe that their plot had succeeded, that Thomas was truly gone. It had to look real, or they would never let their guard down. He needed to buy time, to work in the shadows, until the truth could come to light. "I'll have an idea," Thomas said, a new sense of purpose in his voice. "We'll make them think they've succeeded. I'll stage an accident, make it look like I'm dead. They'll think they've won, and then we'll expose them for who they really are." William's eyes widened, a look of understanding crossing his face. So they think they've gotten away with it? Exactly, Thomas replied, nodding. But once they think I'm gone, I'll make sure they pay for what they've done. We'll make them believe that everything went according to plan. William felt a sense of relief wash over him. Finally, there was a plan. It wasn't just about stopping Clara and Jack from getting away with their plot. It was about ensuring they faced the consequences for their actions. For too long, people like Clara and Jack had lived in the shadows, manipulating others for their own gain. It was time to bring that to an end. As they discussed the finer details of the plan, Thomas felt a sense of clarity he hadn't known before. The truth was out now, and with William by his side, he knew he could take back control of his life. The betrayal, the lies, the heartache, it was all still there, but it no longer defined him. What mattered now was what he did with this moment, with the opportunity to expose the truth and ensure that justice prevailed. William's role in this was critical. He was the eyes and ears Thomas needed, someone who could stay hidden in the shadows while they executed their plan. It wasn't going to be easy, but Thomas knew that if anyone could help him stop Clara and Jack, it was William. "Are you with me?" Thomas asked, his voice steady but filled with urgency. William didn't hesitate. "I'm with you. We'll make sure they never get away with this." In that moment, a bond was formed between them. Not just a millionaire and a homeless boy, but two people who had chosen to do the right thing, no matter the cost. And together, they would make sure that Clara and Jack's treachery would never go unpunished. As the story unfolds, the stakes have never been higher. Thomas and William, two unlikely allies, have stepped into a battle against betrayal, greed, and a plot that could have cost a life. What happens next will reveal the strength of their resolve, the power of truth, and the consequences for those who would stop at nothing to destroy others for personal gain. But their journey doesn't end here. There are still many twists and turns ahead, and you don't want to miss a single moment of this thrilling story. If you're captivated by Thomas and William's bravery and the suspense of this journey, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. By subscribing, you'll stay updated with every new chapter as this story unfolds. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. And leave a comment below. What do you think will happen to Clara and Jack? Do you believe Thomas and William's plan will succeed? I'd love to hear your thoughts, so join the conversation and let's talk about it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.